Welcome back to another episode of Wiltfong's Whiparound. I'm live. I'm in studio. I'm at the 24/7 Sports World headquarters in Nashville, Tennessee. My main man, Chris Belcher, and Jason, the producers of the show, are right behind that wall over there, behind that camera. Big thanks to them. Big thanks to Trey Scott, of course, and his creative influences on this show. We are just coming off the last weekend before high school football kicks off in this great nation of ours. I had a great weekend. I hope y'all did too. I'm not sure many people had as good a weekend as the Florida Gators did down there in Gainesville as they crushed it on the trail, landing 4 top targets over the weekend. We're going to talk about that. We're also going to talk about Alabama. They have the nation's #1 class, looking for a lot more. We're going to talk about Oklahoma, Brent Venables and the Sooners tracking for a second straight top 10 recruiting class. How about Tennessee beating Texas and many others for Jordan Matthews? The Vols sitting at number 12 in the 24/7 Sports Composite Team recruiting rankings. We're going to talk a little bit about Tennessee later in the show. Oregon ripping it up and on the offensive side of the ball. Big-time commit from Keon Sadiq on the 24/7 Sports platform yesterday. And we're also going to preview Xavier McLeod's decision. The top 247 defensive lineman is going to commit live on the 24/7 Sports channel on Thursday at 5:30. So make sure you're hitting like and subscribe so you're getting all the notifications for those programmings, Preps to Pro, The Block, Late Kick, all those programs on the 24/7 Sports platform. So anyway, let's dive in on Florida. Did you guys see the pictures of the new facilities in Gainesville? I talked to some people that saw them after they were unveiled, and I'm telling you, I heard that pool in Gainesville inside those facilities is something that would make the best resorts in the world jealous. And I hope that Jacob LaFrance and his off-field recruiting staff got a chance to utilize it on Monday for the weekend that Florida had. I would include the coaches, but they're preparing for the season. But the recruiting staff, they deserved a day off after a weekend that saw Florida land Kelby Collins, Cameron James, and Will Norman on the defensive front. It was an epic weekend for Florida on the trail. Moving into the top 10 of the 24/7 Sports recruiting rankings, they also landed their first commitment in 2024, top 247 linebacker Miles Graham. But I just picture my man Jacob LaFrance floating in that Florida pool in one of those like Gator life rafts there with maybe a floppy Gator hat on, drink in hand, enjoying Florida's big run on the trail. Florida has a lot of momentum. There was a time where people were worried about Florida. I don't think anyone in that Florida building was worried, but you had people speculating on Florida's slow start on the trail. But I think that for Florida, it really just came down to the prospects that they were identifying, that they keyed in on. Their timetable for a decision is now. And so you look at the recruiting battles that Florida's winning, more importantly to me. They go out and they get Kelby Collins. Well, you beat Alabama and Georgia for him. You go out and get Cameron James. You beat Georgia for him. He also had an Alabama offer. You beat Will Norman. Will Norman was high on Texas A&M and several others. Those are the programs, when you're Florida, those are the programs you're trying to beat on the field and winning an SEC championship and ultimately a national championship. And it starts on the recruiting trail. And I think we've seen under Coach Napier and company, Florida do some things that we did not see under the past couple staffs. Regular recruiting wins against the other upper echelon programs in the SEC. And yes, Florida's not going to win all the recruiting battles, but they're winning their fair share now. Last year, they get Shamar James. They beat Alabama and Georgia for him. They beat Georgia for Kamari Wilson. And then we talk about these guys that they just landed on the defensive line. Average height over 6'5", average weight over 280 from the group over the weekend. This is going to be a big, menacing defensive front that Florida's putting together. These are championship caliber pieces that are coming to Gainesville. And then Miles Graham, the first commit for them in the 2024 class, the #2 linebacker in America per the 24/7 Sports Composite. He's got to be licking his chops at the way Florida's recruiting the defensive line in front of him. And these are guys that I think could play for Florida this coming fall. That's how much of a need that they have on the defensive front. And they're certainly addressing those needs that we've already talked on Whip Around in previous episodes about Florida addressing their needs at wide receiver. Hitting big on the defensive line here over the weekend. And look, Florida's not done, man. They're in on a lot of prospects moving forward. Certainly Cormani McClain, 5-star cornerback, Caden McDonald is a name that they want to get in on. Keon Keeley, we're going to talk a little bit more about Keon Keeley, longtime Notre Dame commit, the #1 edge rusher in the country. Florida's been kicking tires there on Keon Keeley. You have Bryce Thornton, a coveted safety that they're going toe-to-toe with Alabama for. Jordan Hall is a blue chip defensive tackle that's on short list alongside Georgia and Florida State, among others. And then Monroe Freeling's another offensive lineman that they would love to add that they're battling Georgia for down the stretch. So Florida, they're in on the right recruiting battles. They're winning a lot of the right recruiting battles. I think the trajectory for this program with the guys that they're getting and the way that they're addressing their needs is very exciting for the Florida Gators. Let's talk about Keon Keeley, and then we're going to pivot into Alabama. But 5-star defensive lineman Keon Keeley, obviously, it's been a talking point on just about every Wiltfong Whiparound. They're talking about it on Preps to Pro. You can see all the discussion on NotreDame.247sports.com, Alabama.247sports.com, Bama Online. Alabama, they've been trending hard for Keon Keeley after a couple visits. He's been committed to Notre Dame since June, but he has visited Alabama a couple times since then. And as I sit here and talk to you right now, echoing some of my colleagues, Andrew Ivins and Tom Loy, I think that Alabama is the program to beat for Keon Keeley right now. And it seems like a decommitment from Notre Dame is imminent. And from there, I think that you expect him to take some visits moving forward, some official visits. You have the Ohio State-Notre Dame game, week 1 of the college football season. Ohio State's kind of been that third team in the mix for Keon Keeley, much of his process. And then I think Florida, as I said, Florida is a program that's been in touch. There's been some dialogue there. Perhaps the Gators can make a move. But Alabama's track record with developing players across the board, first-round draft picks, their high hit rate with 5 stars. I think those are all things that have resonated with Keon Keeley. A couple great visits to Tuscaloosa. And so Alabama's certainly the team to watch right now for Keon Keeley. And then we'll see, what happens with his commitment to Notre Dame, which he's had since June, and then visits moving forward. But Alabama has all the momentum right now for Keon Keeley. Chris, where are we going from there? We're going to talk a little more Alabama. Alabama is the #1 recruiting class in the country right now. Keon Keeley is one prospect that they're really trending for right now. And when you look at this Alabama class, they have the best defensive back class in the country right now. They have the best running back class in the country. You could say they have the best quarterback class in the country. And I think that they're now putting themselves in position to have maybe that best defensive front class in the country. We talked about Keon Keeley, a couple other defensive linemen that they're in good shape for that are looking to decide here early in the fall. Jordan Renaud and Edric Hill, those are 2 guys that Alabama is certainly well positioned for. And then James Smith and Quay Russaw, 2 in-state 5-stars. They put out their top 6s this past week. Alabama, in my opinion, is the pro. Until someone tells me different, I've just always kind of liked Alabama's position for those guys. Now, I know that they had a great visit to Florida, and those were 2 guys I should have mentioned earlier in the Florida segment as guys with a keen eye on the Gators. And they've already taken official visits to Georgia. But Alabama, with those 2 in-state prospects, I've always liked the Crimson's Tide position for them. And then Bryce Thornton, mentioned him in the Florida segment, but he's going to take an official visit to Alabama and Florida this fall. So it looks like, those 2 programs are well positioned for him in the secondary. Billy Napier and Florida, that first-year staff doing a terrific job. Dan Lanning in Oregon, like I said, we're going to talk about that later in the show. Him and his first-year staff doing a great job. Mario Cristobal in Miami, they're doing an outstanding job as a first-year staff down there in Coral Gables. But how about Oklahoma? This is a program that rallied to finish number 10 in the 24/7 Sports Composite Team recruiting rankings after Brent Venables was hired last year. And they're at number 7 here in the 24/7 Sports Composite Team recruiting rankings right now. And I logged the 24/7 Sports crystal ball for them to land speedy top 100 defensive back Makari Vickers, joining Brandon Drum, Parker Thune, and Andrew Ivins, among others. This is a defensive back with 10.7 speed. He covers a lot of ground. He's a good tackler, makes a lot of plays. You can put him out in coverage, and he can do things in that arena as well. Just a versatile back-end defender. Oklahoma, they have 20 commits right now. 5 are in the top 100. He would be the 6th to join the fold. I like the way it's trending as they battle Alabama and Michigan for him. He's been at just about every major recruiting weekend that Oklahoma has had in the Brent Venables era, and they just have positioned themselves incredibly well for Makari Vickers, and that's not it. You know, they're also in a great spot for David Hicks, 5-star defensive lineman, #1 defensive line recruit in the country from the Lone Star State. As they battle Texas A&M, I'm starting to hear more and more buzz about Oklahoma and their position for David Hicks in that recruitment. Certainly you have A&M, you got Oregon, you got Miami, but Oklahoma seems to have the momentum for David Hicks going into the fall. Tassili Akana, Malachi Coleman. They're in the Jordan Renaud sweepstakes. They're in the sweepstakes for Marcus Deal, one of the best two-way linemen in the country, who's going to visit Georgia this fall with an official visit. Maybe Oklahoma gets the last official, with Arkansas and TCU and USC already getting official visits for Marcus Deal, and Texas also being a contender there. They're trying to flip Peyton Bowen from Notre Dame. So is Texas A&M. So they're heavily involved with Peyton Bowen. And then Ryan Yates is another that they're trying to flip from LSU. Yates and Bowen are teammates with the jewel of this Oklahoma class, Jackson Arnold, 5-star quarterback from the Lone Star State. And when you look at Oklahoma and you kind of compare Brent Venables and his recruiting ceiling to the previous staff in Lincoln Riley and what they did at Oklahoma, look, Lincoln Riley, you knew you were going to have the best quarterback in the country arguably commit. You were going to have dynamic receivers, and you were going to put together a recruiting class that puts you in contention for the college football playoff year in and year out. But similar to like Notre Dame and a couple other programs, Oklahoma's looking for 1 or 2 extra wins on the back end. And I think when you look at the ceiling of Oklahoma recruiting, and what a combination of Brent Venables and Jeff Lebby brings, maybe Oklahoma can find that extra win or 2 with the way that they're recruiting right now, particularly recruiting at an extremely high level on the defensive side of the football. If they can go out and add a guy like Makari Vickers and David DJ Hicks to one of the most electric pass rushers in the nation that's already in the fold, PJ Adebaware, that's a heck of a defensive group. Jacoby Johnson, they're going to play him in the secondary, 6'3", 383-pound athlete that I know that the Oklahoma offensive coaches were fighting for as well. But Samuel Omoshigo, Colton Vasek, these are front 7 difference makers. Lewis Carter making the move to the SEC, and I talked about this with Texas on previous shows. I love the way Texas is recruiting defensively and on the offensive line as they make the move to the SEC. For Oklahoma, their offensive line has already been one of the best in college football, and it will continue to be that with Bill Bedenbaugh holding that room down and guys like Caden Green committing to Oklahoma. Oklahoma has one of the best offensive line classes in the country right now. Joshua Bates, part of that group, the #1 center. But defense, and Brent Venables can be the X factor, the difference maker on the trail, and landing a couple of extra guys that maybe can help the Sooners find that extra win or 2 on the back end that they covet as they try and win their first national championship, since Bob Stoops stalked the sideline and recruited elite quarterbacks, but also recruited elite defensive players at the same time. Another team trying to rise up right now is Tennessee, and they have the #12 recruiting class in the country. And again, you can't win big in the SEC if you're not dominating recruiting around the line of scrimmage. And that doesn't necessarily mean that you're going out and landing all the elite guys. There's only so many Keon Keeleys to go around. But you want to get guys that are strong prospects with high ceilings, and then you develop them. And they have one of the best defensive line coaches in the country, Coach Garner, who has a great reputation. And they've recruited guys like James Pierce, Joshua Joseph, Tyree West, Shandavian Bradley, Caleb Herring in this class. So I think that they're landing high upside guys that have a chance to help Tennessee. I kind of forget the stat, Chris, but Tennessee hasn't had a 10-win season since, 2000. 2003, I think is what it was. So it's been a long time since this program's even been anywhere close to the discussion of even 10 wins, let alone more. But the defensive line recruiting is really coming together. They have their franchise quarterback in the fold, Nico Iamaleava, as the jewel of the class, but they're starting to go out and get some big-time guys in the secondary. They had 2 big recruiting wins over the weekend. Obviously, I mentioned Jordan Matthews, which was on Monday, so the weekend was over. But they beat Georgia for Ricky Gibson over the weekend out of the state of Alabama, and then they land Jordan Matthews. Those are 2 corners that can really run with great length. And so when I look at these guys that Tennessee is recruiting, I don't know if I see as many ready-made guys as what Florida's bringing in. These guys that Florida's bringing in are instant impact dudes that they just landed over the weekend. And then certainly Alabama, those guys could be instant impact dudes if they needed them to be. But Tennessee, these guys, if you look up in 2-3 years, and see one of the more imposing, impressive, dynamic groups of pass rushers in the SEC, I would not be surprised. Oregon, they're also they're another program that Dan Lanning and his staff walked into a very healthy situation. Mario Cristobal and company leave them 4 straight #1 recruiting classes in the Pac-12. Now they finished off the last one, Lanning and company, which included a big win for Josh Connerly down the stretch. They get Kyler Casper, receiver, to reclassify. And receiver is a big position of need for Oregon, and really offensive skill in general. And obviously, when I look at this Oregon class, it's number 13 in the country right now, right on USC's heels there for the #1 spot in the Pac-12. You have Dante Moore, arguably the #1 overall player in the country. 42 touchdowns, just 3 interceptions, state champion as a junior, our alpha dog at the Elite 11 finals. Dante Dowdell, their running back commit, he rushed for over 2,500 yards and 28 touchdowns as a junior. But receiver, big need for Oregon. They get Kyler Casper to reclassify. Jerion Dickey is maybe the most physically imposing pass catcher in this class. He's a 5-star with us. He's in the fold. And then Ashton Kozart, he can absolutely fly at the wide receiver position. So those guys should complement each other well. And then if you didn't catch it, Brandon Huffman had the story on Kenyon Sadiq, top 247 tight end out of Idaho. 6'3", 220 pounds, committing to Oregon yesterday on the 24/7 Sports platform. 78 receptions, 1,162 yards, and 19 touchdowns as a junior. Now that's a year. 2 rushing scores, 3 interceptions when utilized on defense. He's just a natural football player, terrific ball skills. Oregon has a big need at tight end. They have Terrence Ferguson in the room, who's one of the nation's best. But Kenyon Sadiq's a guy that can come in next year and give them another player that can be versatile, that you can create mismatches with. And if you're Kenny Dillingham and you look at what you've done at quarterback, running back, receiver, and tight end, you're pretty excited about the potential play calling that you can have at Oregon next year. Let's end the show with Xavier McLeod. He's going to announce his college decision on Thursday on the 24/7 Sports platform out of Camden, South Carolina. The Gamecocks had for most of this process, been considered the one to beat for Xavier McLeod, who has had 34 tackles for loss over the last 2 seasons. He's a guy that makes a living in the backfield, just a very disruptive player at the point of attack. But Georgia as a program has made a major run for Xavier McLeod over the last couple months. I know he's talking with the Georgia staff every day, talking to Coach Trey Scott, and I'm getting a lot of Georgia vibes here late in this recruitment for Xavier McLeod as they try and finish up this defensive line class with a bang as well. And I think what's really standing out to Xavier about Georgia is just their track record of development, what they did on defense last year, where those young men are hearing their names called in the NFL draft, where Jalen Carter is going to hear his name called in the NFL draft. I think that the trajectory of defensive linemen under Kirby Smart, Trey Scott and company has put Georgia right there at the end with South Carolina, who's done a great job. It's close to home. He's got a great rapport with that coaching staff. He sees a program that's recruiting on the rise as well. The Gamecocks had a top 25 class last year, aiming for another one this year. He's one of their most coveted targets on the board. But I just get the sense that Georgia is making a late move here Will it be enough of a move? We will see on Thursday when he announces on the 24/7 Sports platform. But thank you guys for joining us here live here in the 24/7 Sports studio here in Nashville. Please make sure you hit that like button on this 24/7 Sports page for the latest on college football and college football recruiting.